Welcome, my friends, to another episode of Design MBA, where we interview design hustlers to learn the skills and mindset necessary for designers like us to launch our own business venture. Today, I've got a phenomenal guest with me, Preet Singh. Preet is the founder of DesignX, one of the largest UX and design communities in North America, and the curator, founder, and host of renowned design conferences such as Design Leadership Summit, Remote Design Week, and 5 to 9 Design Conference, and many more other conferences. Over his design career spanning 10 plus years, Preet has had the privilege of working with clients including corporates and unicorns to early stage startups such as Zuckerberg Foundation, Quicken Loans, Xero, TeamViewer, Teespring, Miami Ad School, and so many more. From building a strong grassroots nonprofit movement while in engineering school to founding a t-shirt startup centered around social issues in India, community is at the heart of everything Preet works on. So without further ado, Preet, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much, Jay. Really excited to be here.
So walk me through, your history. So you're born in India, right?
Yep. Born and raised in India. Moved to Canada about 10 years ago, or 9 years ago. Yeah.
So what made you make the move?
That's just the next stage when you grow up in India and, you turn 25, you're like, okay, where can I go next? I'm kidding. And, even though maybe there is some truth to that. So I met my now wife back in India where she was doing like a travel and work kind of internship. And she's from Germany. So I was doing my t-shirt startup back there. And I used to get a lot of these like, kind of expat folks that would come to my store. I had a physical store to get like, some like nicely designed gifts when they would go back to their countries. And that's how I met Nora, my now wife, and we dated for about a year. And of course, India was culturally very different for her. Germany is culturally very different from what I grew up in, including the language and diversity and everything. Yeah. And after 1 year of dating, we decided to, just blindly pick a country where both of us could move to. Yeah, neither of us had been to Toronto, and we just picked it and moved. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's insane. That's quite the crazy love story.
Yeah. Yeah, so those stories usually either go really bad, where you move after 1 year of dating someone, or they work out. And in our case, luckily it worked out.
So at that point, when you decided to move to Canada, were you still doing design work, or you had not made that full transition into the design world yet?
No, I was doing, so actually that's how I got into design is, I was really passionate, right after my engineering school, I was really passionate about the social issues, like, plenty of them in India and how I could, help contribute, to, fighting them, solving them, tackling them. And, I started using t-shirts as the medium of communication to talk about these social issues. And that's how I got into graphic design. I tried to design like some posters, some t-shirts on my own. And I still remember that was actually the first time in one of the, press coverages where I got featured as a young designer from my city, Chandigarh, that's using t-shirts as the medium of social change. That was the first time someone called me a designer. And so using my startup, the Karma Republic, it was called, that's how I got into design, and I was doing everything. I was designing t-shirts. I designed the website. I designed all the graphics. But that was a kind of big motivator to learn design because I was trying to solve my own business goals. So that's how I got into design. And even when I was doing Karma Republic, it didn't make any money. It was a lot of fun. It also like very fulfilling. Like you felt good about, you're trying to make a change, all those things. But to pay my bills, I started picking up other kind of web design and graphic design projects on the side as freelancer.
So you moved to Canada, and you're in Toronto, right?
Yep.
When you moved there? Yeah. Yep. I actually lived there for 2 years or odd years when I was in sixth grade. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was a huge cultural shock for me just moving from India and going there. And we had this like Indian, parathe and tepla, the chapati. So by the time I left there, people were hooked onto it. Like we were like, what is this exotic spice? I remember in sixth grade, I had like everyone in the class watched Dil Chahta Hai movie. One of my favorite movies still.
That's incredible. That's amazing.
So you're doing this graphic design work.
Yeah.
And you're working as freelancer for all these firms.
Yeah.
When did you get the idea, or when did you notice that, hey, you know what? I think there needs to be a design community or a movement here in Canada, and then that I should start it?
So it was all quite organic. There was no kind of one strong strategy behind starting DesignX. It started about me being in Canada for about 5 years. So I came to Canada. I could only come as a student, with an Indian passport. You have a lot of restrictions. So I did that 2-year fake student thing. It was a business program. I really enjoyed it. It was a business program because my parents never let me study business. They were like engineering or science. So I really enjoyed that part. But I knew that, right after this program ends, I want to get back into design. And so after having worked as a designer in Toronto for about, I would say almost 4 years. Yeah. So overall 6 years, I was craving a community, a local design community. So I went to a few events, and I am not the most extrovert person, even though I organize a lot of these like conferences and events and run a large community. If you see me at a third party, like something that I've not organized, if you see me at another conference, you'll see me usually just standing awkwardly by the bar alone, or, I'm like, what do I do? So I would go to a lot of these design events. Also, when I moved to Canada, I had zero social circle. So I would go to a lot of these tech events, startup events, design events. I would listen to the talk. I would roam around awkwardly for 15, 20 minutes and then come back, right?
That's happened to me a lot.
Yeah.
Most of these events, everyone knows everybody. So if you're like the new person there, they all have their cliques. So it's really odd to just break in and kind of introduce, hey, my name is Janil and I'm kind of new here.
Yeah, exactly. And also being a kind of a visible minority, in downtown Toronto, I didn't see, when I go to those events, especially design events, I wouldn't see someone who looked like me, or even brown people or Indian people, for that matter. I wouldn't see them. So it always felt awkward. And to add to that awkwardness, so many times people would come up and they're like, oh, so what do you do? So I'd be like, oh, I work at this agency. And they're like, oh, so you're a developer? I'm like, I never said I was a developer. I just said I worked at an agency just because I'm brown. Or I'm from India, I'm a developer. So that actually happened no jokes, 6-7 times. And I think a part of me was also really kind of annoyed or triggered by that. But I was like, why do you think someone like me can't be a designer? And then add to that, or I would go to these tech startup events, and how they interpret design would be really different, So I would be like, oh, I'm a product designer. And they're like, oh, can you design my business card? Again, nothing wrong with designing business cards, but their understanding of design was so confined. So when I started DesignX, my goal was actually, how do you bring designers together locally in Toronto? So selfishly, I could meet, people like myself.
Yeah.
And then how do you elevate the conversation of design, right? How do you help these folks understand more about design? And it's not just, about designing a business card or, putting lipstick on something. Yeah.
So the first meetup you organized, was it just going to meetup.com and saying that, hey, DesignX officially exists? Or how did you even host the first meetup?
Yeah. So our first thing we did was actually not a meetup. So when I thought of this idea, and another aspect around building DesignX or starting DesignX was the void that I saw in the community was that all these subdomains of design, like graphic design, UX design, design strategy, design research, they were all very siloed. And I was like, there's a lot of learning that happens when these people meet each other, because my journey was engineer turned marketeer turned graphic designer turned website designer. And then when I came to Canada, I became a UX designer and design strategist. And when I started DesignX, I was doing more like design strategies, bleeding into service design kind of work. So it was such a wide spectrum. And so I was trying to find out how I can bring these folks from different domains together. So before even starting DesignX, I actually approached most of the existing design communities in Toronto. And there were some big ones, like the graphic design ones or the design UX design ones or design strategists. Half of them didn't want to talk to me or didn't reply, which, I understand a little bit. They were like, like I run a large design community, and who's this guy coming in, asking me to, give suggestions or something.
Yeah.
And half of them were not interested. Like they were like, no, we're fine being our graphic design community or
Yeah.
being a UX research community. So that's when I was like, okay, then I'll start a Slack group and bring people together. And in fact, I partnered with someone who was already just started a Slack group for designers in Toronto. And so, I joined him and we started just nurturing that small community. And I think we were about 100 people when we were like, okay, let's meet. So it just started as a casual conversation.
And what year was that?
2017. So 3 years ago, February 2017.
Oh, wow.
January, we started the Slack group. In a month, we were like, okay, let's all meet up and maybe invite some speakers. And as I started working on it, we ended up, like, I approached some of the, really well-known names in Toronto, and all of them said yes. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay, yeah. Like, even I was surprised. Like, really? You also want, can you come and speak at our event? And they're like, sure. I'm like, what? Really? And the topic was very broad. It was just like state of design in Toronto, in 2017. And we had one of the design leaders from one of the largest banks in Canada, a design leader from one of the most awarded agency, and then another really, well, I think they're one of the largest fintech companies to come out of Canada. So all three of them said yes. And it was it turned out to be an incredible event, packed. I think our venue capacity was 80. We were at 90 folks. That's from where kind of it became a little more, official and just took off.
Wow. So the first couple of years was just like volunteer effort, like you just, pulling in all-nighters and stuff.
Sorry, you're asking about before I started DesignX or after I started DesignX?
Oh, like during DesignX, like the first couple of years, it was pretty much you and a few people who volunteered just to kind of like get the community going.
Yes, absolutely. So the first 2.5 years, I would say, or 2 years, that was it. Like, I had my full-time job. I did invest a lot of time into DesignX on the side. I do work a lot. I enjoy what I do. So I would end up spending my, weeknights, weekends, just nurturing the community, building it. And as things started to grow faster, then, you had to put in even more effort.
Yeah. So at one point, isn't there like, how do you even manage this? I mean, like you've got a wife, you've got a kid, plus you got a full-time job, and then you're doing DesignX on the side. So at some point, something's got to give, right? Yeah.
So definitely. And, these things, all of those things happen gradually. One thing, I've always kind of trusted is my gut feel. Back in India, I left my full-time jobs like 4 times. The longest tenure of a job I had was 6 months because I would join an opportunity and I was like, this is not impactful work and maybe I should do something else. And I would not hesitate to jump or leave, and I didn't have any savings or anything like that, but I knew that I would always make things happen, be paying the bills through freelance or other things. And I knew that my learning always got elevated every time I, took the plunge. Yeah. And same thing happened with DesignX. I invested a lot of time, a lot of energy into DesignX. It was hard first 2 years, having a full-time job and growing in my career too. So I was not stagnant. Yeah. So doing well at the job, of course, keeping a family happy. And building the community, and the community was growing. We grew from just being a Toronto-centered community to having chapters in New York, Amsterdam, Toronto, Vancouver, doing events in even Montreal and London, and then even starting conferences on the side. So after 2 years, last year is when I did start to feel that okay, I'm starting to maybe burn out. And the second thing was I was like, why do I need a job right now? Like if I'm enjoying DesignX, I should go full heads on into it.
So you quit the job full time?
I did quit it. Yes. Last February.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
It sounds tough, but I think it's just, I built that muscle so much or flexed that muscle so much. It's so effortless for me that my parents still get shocked. And I'm like, how are you shocked? This is like the 8th job that I'm leaving. And they're like, why do you left the job? It was paying so well, or, other things. At the same time, I don't want to make it sound too kind of reckless or aspirational. Oh yeah, leave your job and follow your dreams. I did really work my ass off in the first 5 years, even before starting DesignX. When I started DesignX, I had already bought my first house, of course, with my wife, and not just me alone. We had bought our first house in Toronto, continued to, really work hard at my job. On top of the things you already mentioned, I was still freelancing on the side too. So it was like
Oh my
DesignX,
God.
freelance, family, and job. And last year when I left the job, I did have considerable savings. We had just moved into our second home. The first home became an investment property. So even though I'm not a very numbers person, but there were some financial metrics that I did want to hit, which I had hit. And so it felt a little secure, And then at the same time with DesignX, I was like, what's the worst? Like, which happened this year. I was like, what's the worst thing? All sponsorships will dry up, no revenue will come in, and I might have to go back to a job. And that's not the worst thing, right? When you
it's
really,
not the end of the world.
When you really like what you do. Like I really loved my last job. I didn't leave it because I was not enjoying my work, but it was just that I was really enjoying DesignX too, and I had to pick one of the two, right?
And then you have this business acumen to just making something sustainable. Like with your jobs, with your freelance, I see this trend where you're not necessarily obsessing about every single number going in and out, but you're thinking at a high level, like, hey, how can this be a self-sustaining business? So, it seems like you don't have to like be nurturing it every second.
Right.
So it's kind of like a taboo thing to talk about because most people, when they look at design events and community events, they're like, oh, it should be like nonprofit, like just for the good. But then how the hell is that going to pay the bills? So how did you tackle that with DesignX, with volunteers and all these people you got to pay and stuff?
Yeah, it definitely has been tricky, especially when it comes to communities. There are no comparables, right? If you're starting a tech company, tech startup, there are 1,000 books written, there are, videos and articles that you can read and be like, okay, that's how I, raise my family and friends or, bootstrap it, all those things. With community, definitely a lot of taboo. I still remember when we did our first event, and there was a sponsor locally in Toronto, and they were like, and I think we were doing the event, and we were like, can we have like, would you like to sponsor us? It was a recruitment firm, and they had just gotten me my job, so I knew they had made good money off me, right, by placing me. So I was like, can you help us? Like, I'm trying to do this, and you get in front of all these candidates, so can you help us sponsor? And they were like, sure, we'll sponsor your event. So I was like, they were like, how much? And I was like $1,000. There are about 100 people coming, $10 a person for food and drink. So roughly $1,000. I still remember that sponsor. At the end of the event, I was like, I sent them an invoice for $1,000, and they were like, no, not $1,000. Send us the invoices for how much the food and drinks were instead of, like just $1,000 up front. And I was like, but we talked about it.
Oh my God.
Right. And how much the difference? I think the invoice was like $920 or something. So like $80. And I was like, what do you think happens at the next event or in between? If I'm sending email newsletters, who pays for MailChimp, right? Who pays for the web hosting? Who pays for, like, there are so many costs that folks just, you forget, the least of the cost. Like after the end of the event, the next time, I met the team to plan the next event, I wanted to celebrate. We were like, we did a first event, we worked 5-6 hours that day alone. And then after that, sending thank you emails, blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to treat them to like a meal each. Who pays for that? Right? Like there are all these things. So definitely it was a little challenging, but I definitely did keep headstrong. I did not worry about what people are thinking, how someone is perceiving it. I knew that, I'm not trying to like con anyone. I'm trying to build a sustainable community. And so I'm going to do what is the right thing. And then, if someone wants to ask me, they should come up and ask me. And if they want to make, perceive things, that's okay. We were like, I was very proud. We set like volunteer kind of stipends in place last year. Even before that, like we would do it on an ad hoc basis. Otherwise, every month we would do a team town hall. After the town hall, we would all like at one time we were like 25 people. We would always go out for lunch, and DesignX would pay for it. So my goal was at least have enough buffer of savings that I don't have to worry if, we are doing a winter event and I want to buy like branded hoodies for my team, right? Or I want to get a banner printed, right? Or I want to rent a stage for the venue. So we always kept on, kind of keeping our goals in place. Last year, even we hired one of our volunteers for 3 months or 4 months full time, 3 months full time, to prep up for one of the conferences, paid them the salary. At one time, I also paid for a lot of the phone internet connections for some of my volunteers who were doing social media because they were like, I don't have, good enough data plans, even bought iPhones and laptops for some of our volunteers. because I like to invest back in the people, right? But
This is like a startup. You're
it
treating
is
exactly like a startup.
exactly. But it's a startup where if people think you are making even 10% of the money, and that's going into like a buffer savings, they're extremely wary of that, right? Like I've had people who are like, no, you have to show us all your finances. And I'm like,
What?
why? Like I'm not answerable to you. I'm investing
Yeah.
my own time and money, right? And if I wanted to make money, like freelancing is a great, way to make money. Like I would rather than shut down DesignX and spend all my time there. But again, you get these kind of folks and questions, like I think in anything you would do. So I've learned to, know who I want to share these things with and with whom I'm indifferent to.
Yeah. And recently you started to make the Slack community a paid community, right?
Yes.
Like just charging people for it?
Yes. Yeah. So a couple of things happened. Last year I went full time on DesignX. I had my savings, as I shared with you. So I did not draw a salary last year. I had planned to draw a salary this year because also we were expecting our first kid. And she was born in February. And 2 weeks later, thank you. 2 weeks later, COVID hit. And, our sponsorships for this year were like 20% of last year's sponsorships. Yeah. So those things dried up. In-person events dried up. With that, even more revenue dried up. And at the same time, we decided to hire our first full-time employee. I did not, like the day of the joining of that employee, the first day, like she came to the office, from next day, that office was shut because of COVID. So literally, that was the timing. But I was determined that, okay, I'm not going to let COVID kind of ruin my plans of, building DesignX and all those things. So we kept her on payroll, tried every, put together like virtual conferences, did everything possible so we can meet the expenses of the team. But then after our last conference, we saw that, okay, people are having now Zoom fatigue, so you can't just keep on throwing like virtual events to try and generate these spikes of revenue. And that's when I was like, okay, need to, again, come back to sustainability. And that's when we were like, okay, we have 5,000 people. Let's ask for $2 each from people per month and try and kind of, raise some revenue together. I knew that, it's not like all 5,000 are going to pay. There's still going to be people who are going to complain. But we kept it really accessible because we did have folks from outside North America too. We had folks from India where, $2, even though $2 is not a big deal, but if I had charged like something like $10 a month, it would still have been a considerable amount. Yeah. So that was kind of the reason that, okay, let's at least make sure our basic expenses, like software expenses, we have freelancers that we pay every month for quite a few things that we do, volunteers that we compensate. So I wanted to make sure that those expenses are taken care of. And, I think I'll have to wait even this year, so to see like if I can draw even a salary for this year or not.
And what's the goal there? How many people do you want as paid members to make the whole thing sustainable?
I would say like we would at least, 5,000 people, like at least a revenue, like DesignX generating a revenue of like 100K a year. So we can, have at least one full-time person back on staff. Yeah. And then the other freelancers are, kind of part of that. So at least sustains like 2-3 people. And that's like not including me, so if I decide that, okay, next year I'm like, okay, DesignX is sustainable and we have people to help with some of the things. So I can then take myself out of the operational tasks and either go back to a job or, focus on doing other things with the community. The community itself stays sustainable.
And that's why you mentioned that you look for partners. And not necessarily sponsors. Can you explain the difference? Yes. What's the difference between someone who just sponsors an event and somebody who's like a partner?
Yeah, absolutely. So my goal always when we are partnering with companies is it's not just to, like stick their logo on the website and other places and kind of like, just use ourselves as a billboard. Because, again, my roots were in business and not in, kind of creative arts and design. I do always think of the business impact of any relationship that I'm building, professionally. So with the companies that we tie up with, I am quite focused on what value they get out of the community, but also like what are they contributing apart from just giving us money. So, I'm really careful into the partners that we select, that how engaged are they, how much they understand what we are doing. If we are working on a conference together and they are the sponsor, what value can they bring apart from just the money part? Like I want to brainstorm with them on the topics, on the speakers, on the scheduling and all those things. And I think that approach really helps because overall the event also turns out to be much better experience for everyone involved, right? Like they are more
Yeah.
invested into helping make this event successful because they are not just a sponsor, but it's also like kind of like they have sweat equity into the into the event or the initiative.
Give an example.
Yeah. So like we partnered a lot with Adobe XD folks this year. Really love that team. Like, and not just again when they sponsor us for any event that I'm doing or any initiative. We are doing portfolio reviews. If I reach out to them and I'm like, we are doing portfolio reviews for early stage folks. Can you help me find folks who would be interested? And they'll send me like 20 names. They're like, these are the people that we work with. Who do you want to connect with? And I've connected with some of the most incredible folks. At Remote Design Week, we had some amazing folks that came out. 5 to 9 conference we hosted, like the CEO of Basic Agency, the agency that's done some massive work in Silicon Valley with some of the best tech companies. So Matt was there on one of our panels talking about starting an agency. So like that kind of an individual, coming and sharing his journey was incredible. And I could not have, like, first of all, I did not even think, of that agency or the name because it didn't seem like approachable. And they made it so easy. Like it was like, here's the introduction with them. And
they made the intros.
Yeah, intros, sometimes even confirmation. So those kind of partnerships are incredibly, helpful. But again, it doesn't happen every single time, right? And also it goes both ways. So it's like when they reach out and they're like, Preet, we need help getting feedback on this part of XD. And like there's no monetary kind of incentive for me, but it's more like, it's like if you would reach out to me after this podcast and you're like, Preet, I'm trying to bring this person on the next episode. I'd be like, yeah, sure. I'll make the intro. Right.
That's how this happened. Like Patrick Hill was like, let's make the intro.
Exactly. And I think that's also a beautiful part of our community, of the design community. Folks, it is not about, the kind of extrinsic motivators or thinking about the financial impact all the time. Right. But it's thinking more about the relationships and the long-term impact, even though that would have financial and business outcomes.
And I was just reading through your newsletter, the DesignX newsletter, and there was one post I was mentioning is DesignX getting acquired. So can you tell me about what happened with the acquisition or what was that story about?
Yeah. So, I had some interesting reactions to that newsletter. And, thinking back, maybe... I don't remember why I included it, but at the time I think maybe I was like a little emotionally invested. So it was really exciting. Like I won't lie about it because this year has been such a extremely crappy, and you can bleep the words out if I say anything more. So we had just completed our Remote Design Week. It was at that time it was the largest virtual conference, focused on design. We had put it together in 6 weeks after COVID because, my employee had just joined and I was desperate to just stay above the water. And Remote Design Week had 3,000 plus attendees, week-long programming, some of the best speakers in design. It was just incredible. So right after that, one of the really big names, brand names in design, and I had like a relationship with one of the senior folks there. They approached and it was like, we've been seeing what you've been doing and it's really exciting and we've been thinking of doing something similar. So what do you think about coming together? So it was, of course, that's a massive company and we are this tiny team. So the conversation was around acquisition. So I did have a few chats with the CEO, but then I think both of us had, that company's at a different stage. We are at a different stage. We had kind of different vision for what DesignX would become. So DesignX would still exist as a part of that larger company, or network. And so I did not kind of see myself aligned with that vision at that time. So it was really hard. It would have been, especially now that that conversation was like 6 months ago almost. And the last 6 months, how it's been quite tough. So now that I see that, it definitely would have been, massive ego boost for sure.
Great in the news, like, Canadian entrepreneur
Yeah,
sells his
yeah,
company.
absolutely. And I can go on LinkedIn and make the post and get a lot of likes and all
Yeah.
those things. You get social validation. So definitely it would have helped with those things. But then I didn't think it was the right thing for the community as such. So yeah, I walked away from it. Like it was kind of a respectful. It was like, okay, maybe we chat later in the future, but at this stage,
Yeah.
I don't think it'll work for both of us. So yeah.
Wow. Well, one could argue that if you had such like, an acquisition offer and all you had to do then was just keep on conducting events or maybe just churn out event after another. So why do you look at that? And even without the acquisition offer, if someone looks at this like, oh, DesignX is like a money-making machine, let's just like throw out event after event, like 9 to 5 conference, another conference, every 2, months there's another conference and just bring in the money.
Yeah.
Why do you go away from that kind of idea or thinking?
It's just personal. Like I don't think there is anything wrong in it. I definitely think it's wrong if you are just a serial conference organizer, but you call yourself a community. Because most of these folks, like, I'm seeing a trend now. It's like we organize like 10 conferences in a year, and now we launched a Slack group, so we are a community. It's like, okay, but again, like, it's like, sure, starting a Slack group takes like 30 seconds, right? It's building it, nurturing it, fostering it, which uses a lot of sweat and tears. So, like, building that community, and community is where, all the members are equally invested and also gain from it and get elevated together, right? Not just the bank balance of the conference organizer. So I don't see it as a negative. I am wary of the positioning part. So that's why I have no kind of guilt when I call ourselves a community, because that's what we do. I still spend so much time on everything that's non-revenue generating, like too much time. I know that, but also that's where I really enjoy, like yesterday we were talking about like WordPress websites that I sometimes build on the side, as a freelance, and chatting with one of the community members, and I was just breaking out everything. I was like, this is how much I charge, and this is my process, and this is where you can optimize, blah, blah. And those are the things which I think make it valuable to learn from each other, right, in the community, and not just, again, being just a constant source of pumping out content, one-sided content, right? Content is important, really important, and that's why we also put conferences. But conversations are also really important, right? So you need the content part, but you also need the conversations part.
And I think it's setting a precedence, because if you're just churning out event after an event, then that's the mindset everybody who's associated with that community kind of thinks of it that way. Like, oh, DesignX, another event as usual. And then before you know, I don't even know what the analogy is, but the cow doesn't have any more milk to give.
Right. True. And again, it completely, there's like, I don't want to discourage anyone that wants to follow that path. It's like that there are some massive businesses, being built. Like Web Summit has like 4 other massive conferences that they put up, 3 others, right? And conference businesses sell for massive amounts of money too, if that's your goal, right? Yeah. But then if, like, for me, it would be like, okay, if that's my massive payout dream, then I would rather go and build a SaaS startup or something, right? Rather than trying to be in a massive, like, really competitive space like conferences, right?
And I'm going to get into some of the pet peeves that you might face as a conference organizer. Yeah. So what is your reaction to when somebody says, hey, I want to volunteer for DesignX, and you ask them why, and they say something like, oh, I just want to give back to the community.
That happens. That happens. And again, it depends who is saying it. So, we do get a lot of interest from folks interested in volunteering. I am a very sometimes too much of like a straight shooter, especially in people that I work with. So in the community, in public, you all have to be diplomatic and say the nice things and write things. But
I'm just here for the conference. I'm not here for the job.
Exactly. Exactly. So with people I work with, I am quite direct, and so I appreciate when people come and they're interested in volunteering. I really ask them. I'm like, why are you, like, I'm up on the stage, right, at a DesignX event. I'm the one that's getting most of the credit, even though that's like, even though I'll put up the names, I'll invite the volunteers on the stage. but still people will come back and be like, oh, thank you, Preet, for organizing it, everything, right? And again, I have no shame because I do end up also putting in the maximum amount of effort, all those things. But at the same time, I'm like, what is in it for you? Why do you want to invest your time? You could go out and, either, if financial outcomes is your goal, do freelancing. If getting a job is your goal, then work on your portfolio, work on other things, work on networking. But like, what is your kind of vested interest? And so, of course, when I ask the question, just without any other kind of preamble, folks are like, yeah, I want to give back to the community. And many of these folks are like people that just graduated from a boot camp. And I'm like, you just graduated. You're looking to first get something out to give back, right?
Yeah.
You need to get a job, all those things, gain experience. But again, I think that's just the norm. It's become the right thing to say. So, and again, like that's just the state of things. So what I try and do is make them feel comfortable so they can be really candid with me. So, so I'm like, no, but tell me, like, do you want to be on the stage? Do you want to conduct the interview? Do you want to meet the speakers? Do you want to get a job out of it? And I've had folks who, maybe, and again, it's not easy to go from totally saying give back to the community to asking for like a list of things in return for the volunteer opportunity. So I then try and make it comfortable and also keep on asking that question. So every 2-3 months when we do kind of a check-in, formal check-in, then I will be like, so what are you doing? Like, what do you want to get out? Like, has that answer become clearer? Because sometimes even they might not know, but they want to just get involved, but they don't know what they want to get out of it. But and we've had last year alone, I had I made introductions for 3 of our volunteers who all 3 of them ended up getting a job at that companies, the respective companies that we got and that feels good, it was yes, they put in effort, they helped DesignX, and so I was not lying when I was when I referred them. I was like, this person is really incredible, and I worked with them on these things. Yeah, but at the same time, this is not it should also not be a way for someone to kind of exploit you or anything. We are very clear that we ask our volunteers to not our requirement is, can you spend 4 hours a week on DesignX work? Usually it ends up being even lower than that, because there is always when you have an event, yes, those 2-3 weeks are busy, but then the next 6 weeks, there's not much to do for most volunteers, right? Not all of them. But then the others that do put in the effort, then we do make sure that there are financial incentives, there are other kind of incentives for them.
And I can see that, if I just come to you as a stranger, I don't know you, you would prefer that I say, hey, Preet, listen, I want to volunteer and help out with DesignX, but what I'm hoping to get in return is maybe meet the agency founder who's giving a talk.
Yes.
Maybe you can do the intro. So it's very clear what you're doing. But I think there's this taboo that if I tell you that up front, it's going to seem weird, like this person just wants to get something. But I think it aligns both of our goals in that way.
Yeah, I definitely, and again, that's what I think I did say. I mentioned that it's so much about kind of personal preferences or how your personalities are. So I volunteered for many organizations where they would prefer more flowery terms and things like, I want to make an impact, and I want to do this and do that. And at some places, including myself or leaders that I worked with, I just always appreciated the straight talk. Just tell me. And again, I think definitely being in Canada makes an influence. That people are Canada, I think, does have this problem where you are expected to not be direct and kind of say more overarching great things go around, even though you are very clear on what you want inside, right? Wow. Yeah, so I try not to adhere to those standards.
Now there's so many people, man, that just want to build their own community. I've seen this trend myself where, let's say DesignX is running, it's already successful. So my thinking is more let's say I want to do a workshop series on freelancing, right? And, I tell you and you're like, oh, by the way, we're already doing this 9 to 5, 5 to 9 conference. Yes. And why don't you instead try to merge efforts together so we're not rebuilding from scratch.
Right.
But what I'm also seeing, for example, from Dallas, people just branch off and do their own version of the community. So it's becoming even more fragmented because everybody wants to do it. And sometimes the intentions, I don't think are that noble. I think at some point what happens is if I can't get on stage at DesignX, then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to branch off, do my own community, and I get to be on stage. Right. So what advice would you tell people that want to build off their own community and actually make it sustainable for the long run?
I think that's like a very innate human behavior. It's not a bad thing to do that, to branch off and do your own thing.
Yeah.
Because what they're trying to do is, and you're right, you're spot on. Lot of times, like it's not about the money, it's not about anything else, but it's about the ego. It's like,
Yes.
I want to be known for this thing as my own thing. I do not want to
Yeah.
be known as the lead organizer at DesignX, but I want to be known as the founder or the creator of
Yeah.
this smaller community, right? Which is like one of the core kind of basic human behaviors, right?
Yeah.
Like you want that recognition, and so I think in fact, like people like me can do a better job at like recognizing the team talent and behavior of people that are
Mm-hmm.
helping you, so that those people feel encouraged. Those team members, those folks you
Mm-hmm.
collaborate with, do feel encouraged. I also don't think I do my max or do the best. I'm always more focused on DesignX as the entity. So my goal is also not just to kind of amplify myself. My goal is to more focused on what can I do better for DesignX or for the community. But at the same time, I need to do a better job at making sure that the team members that I work with are also kind of brought more into the limelight and things like
Yeah.
those. And then the folks that are branching off, I would say just, even if you want to do your own thing, like reach out and collaborate and like try and connect those kind of different wavelengths, different thoughts together, because in the end that really helps the community. So there's no harm if someone's like, okay, now I'm going to start my own community and that's only for motion design. But then
Yeah.
if we are doing something on side projects, I would say come on and be like, hey Preet, like our motion design community could share their side projects and we could do
Yeah.
something together. So I'm usually like in fact, like I've made this a principle that I'll just go out and anyone that I really like, I always reach out to them and I'm like, I don't know how, but I would love to figure out a way to collaborate. I remember like when
Wow.
you and I were talking about the podcast last time, just, do an
Yeah.
audio check, all those things. I said that to you too. Like I was like, I really like what you're doing with Design MBA. And, first of all, let me know how I can help you beyond this,
Yeah.
coming on your podcast. But then I'd love to figure out, if there's something we can do together. And many of those times, like I don't have any well thought strategy
Yeah.
or a very analytical kind of approach to these things, but it's just gut feel, right?
What's the end game? Yeah.
Yeah, like it's just a gut feel. It's like, it's almost like saying like, oh yeah, let's hang out again, right? So it's like I
Yeah.
enjoyed talking to you. I saw what you're doing. You know what I'm doing, and I think let's figure out maybe we can do something together, right? And if you have the intent, the
Yeah.
opportunities are obviously endless. So I'm sure there are many opportunities to collaborate, and in the end,
Yeah.
like kind of two brains are better than one. You'll end up creating
Yes.
something much better.
Thank you for the kind words. I think that's something I've always, grown up in Gujarat and in India for the most part. It was always this mindset of like, how can we collaborate with other people
Right.
instead of just going alone?
Right.
So I always had that attitude to things, because the solo journey is really disheartening to kind of like
Right.
continue following on the long road because you're just by yourself. But I think when we collaborate, and one has to lower their ego. It's more of like shared credit at that point
Yeah.
in terms of doing it. So one thing I'm wondering is, how do you deal with rejection? Because I'm sure there's going to be speakers and people that you reached out to for DesignX that
Right.
for whatever reason turned down or couldn't make it. So how do you deal with that rejection?
Right. Right. I'll be extremely candid with you. So my brain, many times works in extremes. I'm a Capricorn, and I've maybe that has something to do with that. I've seen many Capricorns who kind of always be on the extremes, even with their emotions. Either I'll be like extremely calm, that I don't care, or I get like really worked up. So even with rejections, with speakers rejecting all those things, like I would say 95% of the times I'm very indifferent. It's like indifferent as in like I don't get hurt about it. I do try to kind of like poke into it, like why did they say no, like what could I have done better that they could have said yes. Should I made a Loom video and talk about like how great this opportunity is, like you did, right? I really like that part.
Thank you.
Could I have maybe explained DesignX better? Could I have shared the kind of like speaker benefits better, right? Like what would you get out of presenting? All those things. Could I have built the personal relationship first? All those things. So the engineering brain, kind of goes into that tangent. And then the more creative brain, 5% of the times, my ego also does get hurt. And then those 5% of the times I'm like, okay, fuck you. You know what? Like this event will be like, I don't say it to them. Right. But in my mind, I'm like, yeah, fuck you. You know, I'm going to show you, like, this event will be a massive success. Right.
Yeah.
And that's just, you know, I think I do thrive on both these approaches. Like the second approach also does help me give a kick and gets me almost like fired up, right? You're like, okay, like I got a lot of rejections when I started planning remote design week. And it was also like I put it together in such a short time, like 6 weeks, right? So many of them were like, yeah, no, I'm not sure. No one's going to sit on Zoom for 5 days, blah, blah, all those things. So of course you're going to get naysayers also, you know, of course, some of them are generally busy, but the ones that don't believe in you, even when I started DesignX the first time, like no one knew me even in the Toronto community, leave alone the global design community. And many people said no. And that was like, cool, you know, and sometimes I do thrive on that of kind of, you know, doing it because I'm like, okay, let me show you that, you know, I am capable of putting together a good thing. And it would have been amazing to have you. But yeah.
What if the non-believer gets converted at some point after seeing your track record and they're like, oh, Preet, you know, I think now I would love to collaborate. How do you approach that?
I'm really happy about that. Wow. So no ego, nothing. I'm okay. And that has happened a lot of times. Like especially for my first year of DesignX, I've had people who you know, I'd approached early on to either host an event, you know, use their space or have them on the panel, things like those, or invite them to the community. And I was like straight out ignored, and not once, like few times. You know, I would email them a few times and they would just not reply. And I would see that the email has been opened, you know. Right. I've seen people like, again, early on, like look at me and kind of just like turn their eyes away at in-person events because they were like, oh, this person's going to ask me again. Yeah. Even though I try not to be that annoying, pesty person, right? But I just kind of follow up and all those things. Yeah. And those same people then have turned to like them being like, oh, Preet, like we'd love to host you. Can you come into your office space and do an event? Or is there an opportunity for us to collaborate and me to share my learnings, which means like they want to be on the stage, all those things. And again, you know, like I always think like, would I have done this? And it's like, yeah, I probably would have done the same. Like if I was earlier, if I didn't believe someone would really do a good job, and then I'm like, not interesting. But then I'm like, once it kicks off, then you're like, I want to be on that rocket ship or whatever, you know, I want to be participate in that exciting thing. And so I would have done the same. So I don't blame them. I think as designers, one of our strengths is always mapping these behaviors to like the reason. And it's like, that's just how we humans work, right? So
how can people follow you or contact you, Preet?
Follow me. I'm on Twitter, even though I don't tweet that much, but you know, my DMs are open there. LinkedIn is open, and email. My email is preet@designx.community. Also, on the best way is on the DesignX Slack group. I am quite responsive. I try to be responsive, so don't shy away from connecting for anything. Like I have people sometimes who are like, I hate to disturb you, Preet, but my DesignX account is not working, and I'm like, that is my problem. So don't worry about kind of pinging me about that.
But how can people be not that leechy? Like, obviously you don't want to get bombarded with like 15 messages from people like, hey, Preet, I want a job. Can you hook me up? Like, how can they approach that kind of conversation?
That's a very good question. And I think that's not just for me, but I would say like you're approaching anyone in the community that you want to get something out of. I'm not even going to say like someone senior or someone more experienced or more known. Anything that you want from someone, first ask there are two parts to it. One is like just basic etiquettes. Like you're adding someone on LinkedIn, put a one-liner. Like say, Preet, I listened to the podcast or I came to this conference. That's why I'm connected. Like right now, no jokes, I tweeted the other day about it. I have 400 pending LinkedIn connections. And 95% of them have no line. And I do want to connect with people, but I just I literally read every name and then I'm like, do I know this person? Did I see them anywhere? Because I want to be mindful. I don't want to be arrogant or anything like, And so that puts a lot of work on me. So if you would just have those basic courtesy things, and then secondly, even if you don't have anything to kind of offer in return, it's always good to just either say it or, just be like, is there a way I can, help you in any way?
Yeah.
I've not always done that. I've also, when I would early on approach speakers, I would just be like, can you please come and speak at my event, blah, blah,
Yeah.
not offering anything to them in return, which was very selfish of
Yeah.
me, right? So I'm trying to build on that muscle too and learn how to do that better. Is always asking like, is there any way I can help you in return? Or, or even if you can't help in return, like I've seen people, they would approach me and, for some ask. And then at the end, they would be like, and I saw, you recently, an example, like DesignX transition to a paid community. This is a book or article I recently saw on paid communities that might be helpful. Like such a small thing, right?
Yeah.
You didn't offer to kind of, give me anything like massive in return, but you're like, I did think of you and I did some research. And this is something that might be of value in return. And that's really nice. I really appreciate that.
So it's such a common or basic human etiquette that it's rare that it doesn't get to happen often, or I just don't see it at times. And one of the sayings I was always inspired by growing up in India was always like this thing where doge to milega, ya pehle do fir lo. And even with my approach to the whole thing with the podcast and everyone, it's always been about like how like this is, instead of me just hitting someone up, that's kind of one of the reasons why I also did the podcast is like this question that I'm asking you about event organization. I'm sure so many other people want to know about it too. So the value proposition, if I just reach out to you directly via email and ask you these questions versus let's do it via podcast so other people can benefit. If there's something in it for you, for me, for everybody. And then you're probably going to get this, but everybody that's come on the show, I always gift them a book because I love reading books. And that's my way of saying thank you. And it's authentic to me. If somebody's into coffee, then I don't know, like they can gift coffee, whatever is congruent to them.
Right. That's a beautiful idea. That's, yeah. And I think, like, because I generally, and it might not be always the right thing that I'm treating myself as, like I'm designing something and I'm treating myself as the user. But in cases like these of understanding human behaviors, like the first thing is I'm always like looking inside. And also, like, I don't remember, the exact statement, but it's in our like Sikh scriptures, in Gurbani, that it's before you kind of point a finger, like go and like look inside, look within. And so whenever I'm trying to understand these behaviors, I'm like, why don't I do that more? And it's usually, we're living in a time where the most scarce resource is always time. Like every day you are like, I want to pack in 20 things. I want to do my podcast and I want to read the book. And on a tweet on Medium, on Twitter with a long, thread on design and post on LinkedIn with like card images and all those things. And because of that time scarcity, you are always thinking like me, what can I do more to help my goals move forward? Right. And so that's why like anytime you have to switch, like stop, pause, and be like, wait, the person that I'm talking to, what do they want? How can I help them in return? It does require a little bit of like effort. It's not as effortless. And even though growing up in India, again, as you shared, relationships are so transactional there, right?
I know.
And that's because of the society. That's because of, we are not, the society doesn't live in abundance like it is in North America, right? Like there's a massive difference. So there, everyone's just trying to survive for themselves and their loved ones, right? That's the biggest priority. When I came to Toronto, I met a guy who was living in the Valley and had just moved to Toronto. He worked and lived in the Valley for like 10 years, 15 years, even though he was of my age, or 10 years, I think, and then came back to Toronto to build a startup. And he told me of a really beautiful thing. He was like, in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, there is such a culture of giving, and it's not altruistic. It's not like that I just believe in giving, but it's like because you do not know the person you're helping out, who they turn out to be, right? Like, I'm helping this person, and who knows, they'll be the next Mark Zuckerberg, right? So you never know that. So there, everyone's always about, sure, let's meet for coffee chat. Let me, how can I add value to you? And because he was comparing it to Toronto is still a little more transactional. Not the design community. I would say the design community is still largely about giving, but the overall tech community, it's all about like how can I move ahead myself. And that's maybe rooted in, it being majorly immigrant population. And again, everyone trying to,
Yeah.
build their own roots. But I definitely try and always keep that thought in mind, because again, for me also personally, it's been a big mindset shift having grown up in India to always being here. Okay, like let's help out folks, and again, selfishly, it could be karma that I'm helping this person and, later on it could somehow come back and help me too.
True. Very well said, Preet.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. It's been a blast.
Same here. Thank you so much for having me.